In the world of professional wrestling, one small mistake can have devastating consequences. From botched moves in the ring to bad decisions outside of it, these wrestlers' careers were cut short by a single misstep. In this video, we'll look at some of the most shocking moments that brought promising wrestling careers to a sudden and unfortunate end. And for one wrestler, that mistake was so costly, it didn't just end his time in the ring, it left him homeless. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy is the perfect example of what could have been. When he debuted in WWE back in 2005, the company had big plans for him. He won the United States Championship and became Mr. Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 23. After his win, Kennedy even announced that he'd cash in at the next WrestleMania. But things took a turn when he suffered a legitimate injury, causing him to lose the briefcase. WWE had also planned to feature him in a major storyline as Vince McMahon's illegitimate son, but just days before it was set to happen, Kennedy got suspended for violating WWE's wellness policy. While this hurt his standing with the company, he still had the potential to bounce back. Unfortunately, one key incident ultimately ended his WWE career for good. In 2009, Mr. Kennedy made his big return to WWE after recovering from a shoulder injury. In his first match back, a 10-man tag team, he faced off against Randy Orton. During the match, Kennedy attempted a backdrop on Orton, but the move went wrong, causing Orton to land awkwardly on his head and neck. Orton was furious, claiming the botched move could have ended his career. According to Mr. Kennedy, Orton complained to management, and just 4 days later, Kennedy was released from WWE. While he found success elsewhere, WWE never brought him back in any capacity. Robbie and Rory. You could probably say that Kennedy's firing had some justification behind it, but the next wrestler we're talking about lost his job simply because of who his tag team partner was. Robbie and Rory McAllister made their debut as a tag team in 2001, and 5 years later, they were in WWE as the Highlanders. They had a steady career, even becoming #1 contenders for the Tag Team Championship a few times. But one mistake changed everything. At WrestleMania 24 in Orlando, Florida, Robbie decided to check out a TNA show since it was in the same city, and he had some free time. The TNA camera spotted him in the crowd and showed him on live TV using his real name. WWE was not happy. Robbie got an immediate call to leave, and once he got back to the hotel, other WWE wrestlers, including The Undertaker and Finlay, let him hear it. But that wasn't the worst part. Both Robbie and Rory were punished. Robbie was pulled from WrestleMania, losing a $5,000 payday, and Rory, who had done nothing, wasn't used for months, hurting his income. Robbie kept wrestling but was booked to lose every match in less than a minute. 5 months later, they were both fired. Although the Highlanders continued wrestling on the indie scene, WWE has never acknowledged them again. Brad Maddox. If you thought the incident with the Highlanders was wild, wait until you hear about this next one. Brad Maddox got fired for saying just one word. Maddox had a pretty unique WWE career. He debuted in 2012 as a referee, but it didn't take long for him to steal the spotlight when he got involved in a WWE Championship match. After his wrestling days, Brad Maddox became the general manager of Raw and held the position for nearly a year, making occasional appearances on WWE TV. But in November 2015, things took a turn. After a 7-month absence, Maddox returned for a non-televised match where, as a heel, he tried to rile up the crowd by calling them pricks. While he didn't think it was a big deal, WWE management saw things differently. He was fired almost immediately after the match, without a chance to explain himself. Since then, Maddox has only wrestled once, and WWE has all but erased him from their history. Julieta Guerrero. While it's easy to feel some sympathy for Brad Maddox, it's a different story with Julieta Guerrero. After starting his career in Mexico, Julieta made a name for himself when he joined WCW in the mid-90s. However, after about 4 years, he was fired for getting intoxicated during a tour in Australia, which led to his arrest. He went back to Mexico, but got a shot with WWE in 2005. Unfortunately, Juventud gained a reputation for being difficult to work with, reportedly wearing sunglasses backstage and referring to himself in the third person. While those quirks didn't get him fired, one reckless decision did. On the January 6, 2006 episode of SmackDown, Juventud ignored orders not to do high-flying moves, hit his opponent Kid Cash for real, and refused to cooperate in the match. To top it off, he performed the banned 450 splash, a move banned because Juventud had injured someone with it months earlier. Even though Kid Cash wasn't hurt, WWE had enough, and Juventud was fired the same day. They've never worked together since. Sexy Star. Another luchadora not only got fired, but was completely canceled by the wrestling community for her actions. Born in Mexico, Sexy Star started her professional wrestling career at 23, and her popularity skyrocketed after joining Lucha Underground in 2014. But in 2017, one bad decision would ruin everything. During Triple Mania, Mexico's biggest wrestling event of the year, Sexy Star participated in a fatal four-way match. One of her opponents, Rosemary, tapped out when Sexy Star locked in an armbar. However, Sexy Star held the armbar for several seconds longer than scripted, causing real damage to Rosemary's triceps and biceps. This unscripted move outraged fans and wrestlers alike, with Cody Rhodes even declaring he'd never share a locker room with her. Sexy Star will never set foot in one of my locker rooms. I hope others follow suit. Despite Sexy Star claiming it wasn't intentional, the backlash was severe. AAA stripped her of her title and fired her, and other promotions cut ties as well. While she has continued to wrestle, her career has never reached the same heights again. Abraham Washington. While many would argue that Sexy Star got what she deserved, the case of our next wrestler is a bit more debatable. You may not have heard of Abraham Washington or AW, and that's exactly how WWE wants it. AW first appeared in 2009, hosting a segment on ECW called The Abraham Washington Show, where he interviewed other wrestlers. But when ECW ended in 2010, so did the segment. AW resurfaced in April 2012, this time simply known as AW, and began scouting talent to manage. He eventually teamed up with Titus O'Neil and Darren Young, managing them as the prime time players. Everything was going well until one mistake ended his career. On the July 30th, 2012 episode of Raw, Titus O'Neil faced off against Kofi Kingston in a singles match. As always, AW was mic'd up during the prime time players matches, but this time, he pushed things way too far when he said this. AW is bringing up the assault allegations against NBA star Kobe Bryant from 2003. And honestly, that's not something to joke about. WWE even had Michael Cole issue an apology right after they came back from a commercial break. Just 11 days after this incident, AW was let go from WWE. He later argued that his firing was due to his tweet supporting Linda McMahon's Senate campaign, claiming she wanted to distance herself from the wrestling scene. However, WWE shot back, stating that his firing had nothing to do with his political views. It was all about an inappropriate comment he made on Raw. To make matters worse, AW took to Twitter to air his grievances with the company. Since then, he hasn't been welcomed back to WWE and has largely faded from the wrestling world. Austin Aries. While AEW probably wasn't the path to stardom for this next wrestler, he definitely had the potential to be a major player in the industry. Back in 2012, Austin Aries was one of the hottest names in wrestling, having captured the TNA Impact World Championship. It looked like he was on track to become one of the all-time greats. Then, in 2016, he made his WWE debut, stepping onto the biggest stage of his career. However, just about a year after joining, WWE released him from his contract. He later returned to TNA and even won the world title 2 more times, but one bad decision ended up derailing his career. At the Bound for Glory pay-per-view, Austin Aries faced off against Johnny Impact, also known as John Morrison, in the main event to defend his title. After Johnny hit his finisher, the Starship Pain, and secured the win, Aries surprisingly popped up right after the match and didn't sell the move at all. Instead, he started yelling at the commentators and the crowd, making quite the scene. There's been a lot of discussion about whether Austin Aries' actions were scripted or if he truly went off the rails on his own. What we do know for sure is that after this incident, Aries decided to leave TNA. Since then, he hasn't returned to any major wrestling promotion and has found himself working in front of much smaller crowds. Perry Saturn. At least Aries still has a place to call home, but unfortunately, that wasn't the case for Perry Saturn. When he joined WWE, he was already at a disadvantage because of their bias against wrestlers from WCW. However, it was really a poor decision that ended up sabotaging his chances of becoming a top star. In 2001, he faced off against an enhancement talent named Mike Bell, and what should have been a routine match ended up marking the beginning of the end for Perry Saturn's career. At the start of the match, Mike Bell messed up an arm drag, which caused Perry to crash down on his head. What was supposed to be a scripted wrestling match quickly turned into a real brawl, with Saturn throwing some serious punches. Things really spiraled when Saturn tossed Bell out of the ring, and he landed head first. It could have easily led to permanent injury, but while Bell was okay, it marked the beginning of the end for Perry Saturn's career. Shortly after that incident, he found himself in a storyline where he fell in love with a mob boss, but things went downhill fast from there. By 2002, he was released from WWE, and things didn't get better. Saturn continued to wrestle on the independent circuit, but a drug addiction took hold after he was shot in the neck while trying to save a woman from 2 attackers. This addiction took over his life, leading him to spend 2.5 years homeless. Eventually, he managed to overcome his struggles, but while Perry Saturn never regained a significant spot in wrestling, he did compete in a few matches once he got back on his feet. Big E. It's hard to believe it's been 2 years since Big E suffered that devastating neck injury on SmackDown. As time goes on, it seems less and less likely that we'll see him compete in WWE again. The injury happened on March 11, 2022, during a match where The New Day faced Sheamus and Ridge Holland. Big E took a brutal overhead suplex outside the ring, landing right on his neck and fracturing both his C1 and C6 vertebrae. Over the past year, he's shifted to being a pre-show panelist for WWE, which might indicate that he's ready to hang up his wrestling boots for good. Corey Graves. When Corey Graves announced his retirement in 2014, fans were left in shock. Nobody had any idea he was even injured. It turned out he had suffered a serious concussion that forced him to hang up his boots for good. This concussion reportedly happened during an NXT TV match against Sami Zayn, where Graves took a crossbody but landed awkwardly, failing to tuck his chin. After retiring, he transitioned to the role of commentator, where he's really excelled. Fast forward to 2022, and it was revealed that Graves has been medically cleared to return to the ring, but so far, he hasn't made his comeback to the squared circle, if he ever does. Diamond Dallas Page. It's no secret that Diamond Dallas Page's time in WWE from 2001 to 2002 was far from stellar. In fact, it ended in the most devastating way possible. DDP faced a career-ending injury during a match in 2002 against Hardcore Holly on an episode of SmackDown. During what was supposed to be an epic high-impact superplex, things went terribly wrong. The landing didn't go as planned, and DDP suffered a severe injury to his neck. In an interview with Hannibal TV, DDP described the terrifying moment, saying, "I felt like I was paralyzed for an instant." This unfortunate incident marked DDP's last match as a full-time wrestler. Although he would make several appearances in TNA and WWE in the years that followed, he was never able to commit to another full-time career due to those lingering neck issues. As of now, wrestling fans are left wondering if DDP will ever make a dramatic return to the ring, especially with his potential return to the squad circle. Stone Cold Steve Austin. Unlike many of the wrestlers on this list, Stone Cold Steve Austin faced a career-ending injury, but still chose to continue wrestling. The injury occurred during the iconic 1997 SummerSlam pay-per-view event, where one of the main matches featured Owen Hart going up against Austin for the Intercontinental Championship. Before the match, Owen wanted to perform a sit-out piledriver on Austin, but Austin insisted on sticking with the traditional piledriver, which involves the wrestler going down on their knees. Unfortunately, Owen proceeded with the sit-out version anyway, resulting in a devastating accident that shattered Austin's neck. Instead of taking a much-needed break to recover, Austin postponed his neck surgery until 1999, which ultimately led him to retire in 2003. Despite these challenges, the Texas Rattlesnake made a remarkable return to the ring in 2022 for one final match against Kevin Owens. However, due to the severity of his neck injury, it's highly unlikely that we'll see him embark on another significant run as one of WWE's greatest legends. Paige. Before Paige, also known as Saraya, was finally medically cleared to return to the ring in AEW, she faced a heartbreaking career-ending injury back in 2017. This all happened during a 6-woman tag match at a live event, where things took a turn for the worse. In a split second, Sasha Banks delivered a kick to Paige's back, leading to a devastating injury. Paige immediately collapsed to the mat, gripping her neck in agony as the match came to a halt. It was a moment that fans and wrestlers alike would never forget, and unfortunately, it marked the end of Paige's wrestling career in WWE. Fast forward to 2018, Paige opened up in an interview with Give Me Sport, where she expressed that she held no resentment towards Sasha Banks for that fateful incident. Nothing was ever Sasha's fault. She got so much backlash. And even in the ring, when we were in there, people are chanting "Sasha sucks." And it really upset me to hear that, because it wasn't her fault. The thing is with me, right? That move where she kicks me in the back, I had taken that so many times previously that I was so stubborn. And I thought, I can still do these kind of things. And I thought my neck was just as strong as it was before, but unfortunately, it's not. So I called this move, and I told her to do it, and so she did it. And unfortunately, my neck wasn't strong enough, and it snapped all the way back. And it was essentially the same as having a really bad car crash. The whiplash was. Tyson Kidd. Injuries are an unfortunate part of the game in professional wrestling, and they can strike when you least expect it. Take, for example, the dark match between Tyson Kidd and Samoa Joe back in 2015. What should have been just another night of exciting wrestling turned into a life-altering event for Kidd. During the match, he suffered a devastating neck injury after a muscle buster, which was so serious that it put his life at risk. Imagine being in the prime of your career and suddenly facing a situation that could have ended it all, not to mention your life. The news of Kidd's injury hit everyone hard, especially his fellow wrestlers in the locker room. He was not just another competitor. He was beloved by his peers, known for his hard work and dedication. It was incredibly upsetting to realize that this talented performer would never step into the ring again. However, WWE stepped up and offered him a new opportunity as a producer. And you know what? Kidd has really thrived in this role, using his experience and passion for the business to excel for nearly a decade now. Roode. On May 1st, 1994, Roode made wrestling history when he pinned his opponent to capture the WCW International World title. At that moment, it seemed like just another milestone in his promising career. However, little did anyone know that this match would actually mark the beginning of the end for Roode. During the bout, he suffered a serious back injury after taking a dive at ringside. He landed awkwardly on the edge of the ramp, and that one misstep changed everything. This injury proved to be so severe that it forced Roode to retire from wrestling altogether, a heartbreaking turn of events for both him and the wrestling community. At just 35 years old, Roode still had so much left to give to the sport. His untimely departure left fans and fellow wrestlers mourning the loss of a talent who had so many more years of thrilling performances ahead of him. Draws. In 1999, Draws faced what would be his last wrestling match, and it ended in a way no one could have anticipated. During a match against D'Lo Brown, a botched powerbomb led to a devastating neck injury for Draws. The damage was so severe that it left him as a quadriplegic, abruptly ending his promising wrestling career. This was a heartbreaking moment in WWE history, especially considering how much potential Draws still had to contribute to the wrestling world. Despite the tragedy, D'Lo maintained a close friendship with Draws throughout the years. In a candid shoot interview in 2014, D'Lo opened up about that fateful incident, sharing his thoughts and emotions surrounding it. Sting. The arrival of the legendary Sting in WWE was an electrifying moment for fans, especially during the Night of Champions event in 2015, where he faced Seth Rollins for the WWE World Championship. Sting delivered a phenomenal performance, showcasing the skills that made him an icon in wrestling. However, the excitement turned tragic when Rollins executed a buckle bomb, resulting in a severe neck injury that forced Sting to retire from in-ring competition. Despite the incident, Sting remained gracious and placed no blame on Rollins. In an interview with Bill Apter, he reflected on the experience with humility and wisdom. Thankfully, a few years after his retirement, Sting made a triumphant return to the ring in AEW, participating in high-profile matches. This allowed him to retire on his own terms and leave a lasting legacy in the wrestling world, a rare opportunity that Sting truly made the most of. Bret Hart. As we neared the turn of the millennium, Bret Hart was at the peak of his career, proving time and again why he's considered one of the greatest wrestlers in history. Unfortunately, WCW's poor booking decisions and signs of the company's decline were becoming increasingly apparent. Still, Hart consistently showcased his remarkable talent, reminding fans of his legendary status. One of the most infamous moments came at the 1999 Starrcade event when Bret defended his world title against Goldberg. During this match, Goldberg delivered a brutal kick that struck Hart squarely on the head. In his autobiography, Hitman: My Real Life in the Cartoon World of Wrestling, Bret recalled, "I fired Goldberg into the ropes, and as he reversed me, I heard him call, 'Watch the kick.' I had no idea what kind of a kick he meant, and there wasn't much room coming off the ropes. Goldberg's right foot flew just under my right hand. Wham! It felt like someone chopped me with a hockey stick," Bret continued. "It was an agonizing blow that sent me crashing to the mat, where I lay holding my neck just behind my right ear at the base of my skull." The infamous mule kick left Bret with a serious concussion. Unaware of the severity, he continued to compete, which led to a diagnosis of post-concussion syndrome that forced his retirement. It's no wonder Hart resents Goldberg. His career was cut short due to a critical error. And there you have it, folks. We've highlighted some WWE wrestlers whose careers ended due to a single move. If you have any thoughts, drop a comment below. Don't forget to stick around for more wrestling content, and we'll see you next time.